In 1987, the television screen was this heavily guarded one-way street.
Right.
You didn't talk to it, and strangers definitely couldn't use it to talk to you. You invited this authoritative, pristine feed of information right into your living room, basically trusting the broadcast networks implicitly.
Yeah, you didn't question it.
Exactly. Until a Sunday night in Chicago when the system completely broke. And, well, a man in a rubber mask proved that the reality inside your home could actually be taken hostage.
It's wild.
Yeah.
Because that abrupt, forced entry into the private sanctuary of the home, I mean, that is what elevates this from just a simple prank to a really profound cultural trauma.
Yeah.
It wasn't, a horror movie you opted to go watch. It was a real-time, unavoidable breach of your personal space.
It really is. And our mission today is to explore, well, not just the bizarre sequence of events that unfolded on November 22nd, 1987, but to deeply understand the mechanics of the hack itself. Like, why this brief malfunction of reality so deeply unsettled the viewers who witnessed it, and why it remains one of the most infamous unsolved media mysteries in history.
What's fascinating here is that the psychological terror of this event didn't come from a ghost or a monster or even like a threat of violence. It came from the sudden, jarring realization that the impossible could happen. We are talking about a total instantaneous loss of control.
Yeah, just out of nowhere.
Exactly. Someone seized command of millions of screens, overriding the monolithic power of corporate television without a single shred of warning.
Okay, let's unpack this because the historical context here is just absolutely crucial to understanding the impact.
Oh, for sure.
If you're listening to this today, you live in the internet age. We are completely accustomed to digital chaos.
Yeah, it's an everyday thing now.
Right. A live stream gets interrupted, a website gets defaced, maybe a social media account gets hacked by a troll. We expect a certain level of vulnerability in our digital infrastructure. But broadcast television in the late 1980s was an entirely different beast.
Yeah, bro.
It was impenetrable. When a local news anchor spoke or a network broadcast a primetime show, it felt almost ordained. It was the absolute voice of authority.
Well, television in that era was a closed loop.
Yeah.
It was heavily regulated by the federal government and tightly controlled by these massive corporations.
Right.
The equipment required to run a television station cost millions of dollars and filled entire buildings.
Right.
So the idea that an unknown entity could somehow slip into that closed loop and broadcast their own face onto your television set, I mean, it was unthinkable.
Unimaginable.
It would be like someone independently taking over the PA system at a presidential inauguration. Just, you couldn't do it.
And to really understand the sheer shock of that breach, we have to look at the exact moment that illusion of security shattered. So the first intrusion happens on Chicago station WGN-TV.
Right, the big local station.
Yeah, and it's prime time. Sports anchor Dan Roan is doing a completely standard, mundane highlights segment. He's talking about the Chicago Bears game, giving the audience exactly what they expect, and then suddenly, bam!
Wow.
The screen violently cuts to black and then straight to static.
Now, a sudden loss of signal is the quintessential television nightmare for a broadcaster. But for the viewer, it's mostly just an annoyance.
Right, you figure your antenna got bumped.
Exactly. You assume a cable was unplugged or a transmitter blew a fuse. But the static only lasted for a moment.
Yeah, and out of that static emerges a visual that is pure, unadulterated nightmare fuel.
It really is.
A man appears on the screen, swaying silently. He's wearing this heavily distorted, grotesque rubber mask of the fictional TV character Max Headroom. Now, for those who don't remember the 1980s, the real Max Headroom was designed to look like a slick, computer-generated artificial intelligence.
Yeah, he was supposed to be the future.
Right. He was futuristic, wearing a sharp suit, and supposedly living inside a computer.
But the figure on the WGN broadcast is a dark, funhouse mirror version of that polished corporate mascot.
Yeah, it's so creepy.
It is. The mask has this fixed plastic smile and bulging sunglasses. The analog distortion is incredibly severe, making the image shake violently. And behind him, there's this piece of corrugated metal spinning around.
Which is just wild to look at.
Right, and it's clearly a cheap, homemade attempt to mimic the real character's high-tech, rotating digital background.
And the most unnerving detail of this first intrusion on WGN is the audio. Or, well, rather, the complete lack of it.
Yes, the silence.
There is absolutely no sound. The figure is just twitching with these incredibly jerky, erratic movements in complete silence. It is so deeply unsettling. If you're sitting in your living room, the silence makes it feel like someone is standing right behind you.
The silence changes the entire dynamic. Without audio, there's no message, no demand, no context whatsoever.
Your brain just doesn't know what to do with it.
Exactly. Your brain is scrambling to make sense of the visual information and failing. Now, the station engineers at WGN were incredibly fast.
They were.
They managed to switch the frequencies and restore the regular broadcast feed after roughly 30 seconds. Because it was so brief and silent, the immediate public reaction was mostly confusion.
Yeah, what else would you think?
Some viewers thought it was a promotional stunt. A lot of people assumed it was just a really strange equipment malfunction at the station.
You almost have to rationalize it, right? You tell yourself, oh, they must have played the wrong tape in the control room.
Right.
But looking back, that first 30-second silent breach was clearly just a test run. The intruder was calibrating their equipment, probing the defenses, just making sure their signal could break through before launching into something much darker and far more deliberate later that night.
They needed to know they actually had the power to override the station. And once they had that confirmation, the gloves came off.
Yeah, they really did. Because 2 hours later, the escalation proves this was a deliberate, targeted attack. We go from a strange, silent glitch to a deeply uncomfortable performance.
Oh, yeah.
Around 11:15 p.m., a second Chicago station, WTTW, is hijacked. This time, it happens right in the middle of a broadcast of Doctor Who, specifically, an episode called Horror of Fang Rock.
Talk about perfect timing.
Seriously. And the timing here is critical because WTTW's engineers couldn't stop it quickly. There was nobody at the transmitter. The hijacker manages to hold the signal hostage for over 90 seconds, and this time, there's audio.
That introduction of audio is really where the event shifts from a bizarre technical anomaly into a true descent into chaos.
Chaos doesn't even begin to cover it, because if someone pulls off a massive broadcast override risking serious federal prison time, you'd expect a manifesto.
Right, you expect demands.
You expect a political message, a list of demands, or some sort of clear ideological statement, but the audio is just this masked figure rambling incoherently.
It's just nonsense.
Complete nonsense. His voice is heavily distorted, shifting in pitch. He's mocking local Chicago television personalities, actually calling out WGN sports anchors by name. He's quoting random commercials, singing the theme song to Clutch Cargo, and letting out this unnatural, echoing laughter.
What really points to a high level of premeditation beneath all that madness, though, is a specific, deeply ironic prop used during the broadcast.
The can of soda.
Yes. At one point during the rambling, the hijacker holds up a can of Pepsi.
Which is such a brilliant, twisted inside joke.
Exactly.
Because the real Max Headroom character was famously a corporate spokesperson for Coca-Cola, so holding up the Pepsi can, just tossing it around, is this direct, mocking inversion of the corporate image he's parodying. He's essentially weaponizing the network's own commercialism against them.
It reveals that despite the frantic, erratic behavior on the screen, there's a very deliberate mind at work, carefully orchestrating the symbols being broadcast into these homes.
And then, just when you think it can't possibly get any weirder, the broadcast reaches its climax. The hijacker suddenly changes the camera angle.
This is the part that still shocks people.
It's so weird. The masked figure leans over, exposing a part of his body to the camera. Then, an unseen person, presumably an accomplice who is entirely off camera, starts spanking him with a fly swatter.
It is a profound whiplash for the viewer. You are watching a sophisticated cybercrime devolve into a surreal, slapstick performance.
Yeah, and while he's getting hit with the fly swatter, you can hear a woman's voice laughing in the background. The masked figure screams dramatically in mock pain, and then mid-strike, the signal just abruptly cuts away.
Sashes.
The screen goes black, and regular programming returns. Doctor Who is back on the screen. The WTTW announcer actually comes on and says, as far as I can tell, he's a lot out of his mind. And the entire city of Chicago essentially explodes with confusion.
This raises an important question, and it's the exact question that still haunts investigators and the public today.
Why?
Yeah. Why do any of it? The sheer lack of a clear, rational motive is exactly what makes the footage so terrifying to watch, even decades later. When we see a crime or a breach of this magnitude, our brains crave a logical explanation. We want a reason.
Right, we need it to make sense.
When the reason is just pure, unfiltered absurdity, it deeply disturbs our sense of order.
So what does this all mean? If I'm sitting there watching this, I'm not thinking about the political implications. I'm just incredibly creeped out. It feels inherently wrong.
What you're experiencing is a severe case of the uncanny valley effect, compounded by evolutionary biology.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, the uncanny valley is that unsettling feeling we get when something looks almost human, but is just far enough off to trigger our brain's threat detection system. Human beings are biologically wired to detect subtle cues of sickness, disease, or death.
Like things being asymmetrical.
Exactly. Things like facial asymmetry, unnatural skin tones, or erratic movements. It's an ancient defense mechanism to keep us away from pathogens.
So when we see a guy in a rigid plastic mask with a fixed smile, moving in these jerky, spasmodic ways, our lizard brain is just screaming, "Stay away, this is dangerous."
Exactly. You combine that biological revulsion with the poor analog signal corruption and the distorted, pitch-shifted voice, and it feels like accidentally watching something that was never, ever meant for public viewing.
Wow. Yeah.
It feels like watching someone's mental state unravel live on television, broadcast directly into your safe, comfortable living room.
Which makes it so tempting to just dismiss the whole thing as a prank. I mean, you hear rubber mask and fly swatter and you think, okay, this was just some bored college kids messing around in a garage on a Sunday night.
It's the easy answer.
Right. But the technological reality of 1987 tells a completely different, much more intimidating story.
That is the ultimate paradox of the Max Headroom incident. The behavior on screen was chaotic and juvenile, but the methodology behind the screen was essentially genius level for its time.
Let's talk about that technological barrier. If I'm trying to override a massive TV station, my first thought is that I need to somehow break into the actual broadcast building, hold the control room hostage, and literally plug my own tape deck directly into their system. But that's not what happened here, is it?
Not even close. Physically storming a TV station would have resulted in an immediate police response and arrest.
Yeah, obviously.
And you couldn't just hack a computer system remotely because everything was analog. To pull this off, the hijacker exploited a very specific invisible vulnerability in how television signals were transmitted across a city.
Okay, so how did TV signals actually travel from the news desk to the antenna back then?
In 1987, the television studio where the anchor sat was usually located in one part of the city, but the massive transmission tower that actually blasted the signal out to the public was located somewhere else.
Usually somewhere really high up, right?
Yes, usually on top of a very tall building. In Chicago's case, the Sears Tower, or the John Hancock Center. To get the video from the studio to the tower, the station used something called a studio-to-transmitter link, or an STL.
Okay, an STL.
This was a highly focused, invisible beam of microwave energy, shooting directly through the air from the studio roof to the receiver on the tower.
So the hijacker didn't hack the massive broadcast tower itself. They intercepted that invisible microwave link. It's almost like, well, cutting the cord between a microphone and a speaker and plugging your own microphone in before the sound even reaches the crowd.
That is a brilliant way to conceptualize it. To override the broadcast, the intruder had to throw a stronger microwave signal at the receiver on the Sears Tower than the television station itself was throwing.
Another way to think about it is, imagine a massive stadium. The stadium has a multi-million-dollar, state-of-the-art public address system, just blasting music. What this hijacker did is the equivalent of a guy sneaking up to the outside of the stadium with a massive, illegal, homemade megaphone, and somehow shouting so incredibly loud that he completely drowns out the stadium's own speakers.
Yes, but to shout that loud in the microwave spectrum required highly advanced technical knowledge and profoundly expensive equipment.
Right. This isn't stuff you buy at Radio Shack.
Not at all. We're talking about tens of thousands of dollars worth of transmission here. And microwave signals require a direct line of sight. They don't bend around buildings.
Oh, wow.
So the hijacker had to physically transport this heavy equipment, likely up to the roof of a tall building or an apartment in a high-rise, perfectly align a transmission dish with the receiver on the Sears Tower, and blast their signal at the exact right frequency.
Which means this wasn't a couple of kids with a ham radio. This was someone highly skilled, highly organized, and very well funded. The technical requirements alone meant the suspect most likely had professional engineering or broadcast experience.
Definitely, yeah.
Which brings us to the investigation, because when you hijack two major television stations, the federal government gets involved immediately. The Federal Communications Commission, the FCC, launched a massive, quick, national investigation. And logically, their job shouldn't have been that hard, right?
You would certainly think so. The parameters were incredibly narrow.
The technical requirements should have drastically reduced the suspect pool. If you're the FCC, you just ask, how many people in Chicago in 1987 have access to high-powered microwave broadcasting equipment, the engineering know-how to aim it perfectly at a transmission tower, and the bizarre motive to do so?
Right.
The list had to be incredibly short.
It should have been a very short list. But the FCC's investigation was hampered by the very nature of the crime. The hijacker overpowered the signal dynamically, meaning they didn't leave a physical trace at the tower itself.
Ah.
Once they turned off the transmitter, the invisible beam was just gone.
And despite all the national attention, despite the federal resources and the FBI stepping in to assist, the authorities came up completely empty-handed. They found nothing.
Nothing at all.
There were no arrests, there were no confirmed suspects, and to this day, there is no definitive official explanation for how they pulled it off or who they were.
The void of official answers is what truly cemented this event into a legend. Whoever performed the hijacking pulled off the impossible and then vanished completely.
Yeah.
There were no repeat incidents. There was no public confession years later to claim the glory. Just total silence from the perpetrators.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Because when official authorities fail, the public steps in to fill the void. For decades, there has been this intense amateur investigation and cultural obsession with this tape.
Oh, absolutely.
The internet basically adopted this mystery as its own. People have spent years analyzing the grainy footage frame by frame, isolating the audio tracks, and trying to extract any possible clue from that chaotic performance.
And those internet sleuths have found fascinating details that the initial investigations might have just glossed over.
Like what?
Well, the specific references the hijacker makes to local television personalities, the inside jokes about WGN, the precise knowledge of when the WTTW transmitter would be unstaffed, it all points towards someone who was deeply, intimately familiar with Chicago broadcasting culture.
So not just a random hacker.
No, it wasn't an outsider looking in.
Yeah.
It was someone who knew the ecosystem inside and out.
So, based on all the evidence gathered over the years, there are really two main theories that have emerged about who is behind the mask. The first major theory is the insider theory. This posits that the hijacker was a disgruntled broadcast engineer or a media insider. Someone who worked in the industry, who felt chewed up by the corporate machine, and decided to use their technical expertise to mock corporate television right from the inside.
The insider theory makes a lot of logical sense. It perfectly explains the motive frustration with the industry, and it absolutely explains the means, as an insider would have access to the expensive equipment and the knowledge of the station's vulnerable microwave frequencies.
Yeah, that tracks.
It also frames the Pepsi-Coke joke and the mockery of TV anchors as a deliberate inside job designed to embarrass the bosses.
It's the ultimate disgruntled employee revenge. But the second major theory takes a different angle. It suggests that this was a bizarre piece of anti-establishment performance art, like a radical avant-garde art piece designed to intentionally shock the public.
In the performance art view, the absurdity is the point. The lack of a political demand isn't a bug in their plan, it's the defining feature. The artist wanted to disrupt the mindless consumption of television with an abrasive, confusing shock to the system. The fly swatter, the mask, the scream, it was all carefully designed to be a disruptive statement against the pristine, sanitized corporate world of 1980s media.
So it's punk rock, basically.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It shares DNA with punk rock or daddyism, breaking the rules just to prove the rules can be broken.
Both theories are incredibly compelling, but neither has ever been proven. We are just left with this 90-second tape of pure chaos.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the legacy of the Max Headroom intrusion goes far beyond a weird guy in a mask getting hit with a fly swatter.
Definitely.
Think about the era. In a pre-internet age, authorities were completely, utterly powerless to stop an unknown entity from speaking directly into millions of homes in real time. They were caught entirely flat-footed.
It exposed a terrifying vulnerability in the systems that people trusted the most. Without warning, without permission, someone bypassed the gatekeepers and took over the reality being beamed into your living room. The viewers had to sit there and realize that the sacred, professional broadcast they relied on was actually fragile. The one-way street could run in reverse.
It permanently shattered the illusion of broadcast safety. It proved that the invisible airwaves surrounding us were an active battleground.
So to bring us back to where we started, we've journeyed from a quiet Sunday night in 1987, where a routine sports broadcast suddenly cuts to static, into a surreal, unsolved glitch in reality.
It's been quite a ride.
We've explored how a team of rogue operators used genius-level engineering to exploit invisible microwave links, overriding multi-million-dollar corporate infrastructure to broadcast pure biological nightmare fuel into millions of homes. It took just 90 seconds to break the trust of an entire city, and almost 4 decades later, we still don't have the answers.
And that brings up a lingering thought that makes this mystery so uniquely haunting. We spend so much time analyzing how the microwave transmitters, the line of sight targeting, the technical audacity. We spend hours debating the why, the uncanny valley, the performance art, the disgruntled revenge. But perhaps the most disturbing element isn't the act itself, but the aftermath. The hijackers pulled off the ultimate breach, they proved the system was vulnerable, and then they completely evaporated.
They just walked away from the greatest broadcast heist in history and kept their mouths shut.
Which means, mathematically speaking, they are likely still out there. Right now, ordinary people could be walking around living completely normal, quiet lives.
Wow.
Maybe they work in an office building downtown, or they're standing behind you at the grocery store. They are quietly watching as their bizarre 90-second interruption has slowly transformed into an immortal global media legend. It really makes you wonder, have you ever walked past someone on the street totally unaware that you just brushed shoulders with the architect of the ultimate unsolved mystery?
What an unsettling thought to end on. You truly never know who you're standing next to in line for coffee. Thank you for joining us as we unpacked this incredible piece of media history. We appreciate you taking this deep dive with us, and we'll catch you on the next one.